So I guess maybe just to jumpstart our conversation, if you could tell me a little bit about sort of the high level view about Courtroom 5.
Yeah, Courtroom 5 is reimagining delivery of legal services in the United States. There are millions of people handling real litigation in our courts every year. Not Judge Judy's court, right? Like if you have a traffic ticket or a small claims case, you can typically find a low-cost technology solution to help you file a form, get ready to speak with a judge, and you're done. But there are like 7 million people handling debt collection, foreclosures, even personal injury claims, dozens of other types of cases on their own because they can't afford a $5,000 retainer at $300 an hour to pay a lawyer to represent them. And the vast majority of these people are opposed by people who do have a lawyer, right? And so they show up to court and they try to manage these complex technical procedures against somebody that's been doing this their whole career, right? And so you can just imagine the results there. It's pretty messy. And people are, unjustly losing their homes. They're losing access to their kids. They are, having to deal with injuries they may have suffered at somebody else's expense, just really life-altering consequences without really having an opportunity to be heard in court. And I say to people all the time, this is not just unjust, it's undemocratic. This is not, a high-end retail store where you can't afford to make a purchase, right? This is our government. And this is in particular the branch of our government that's set aside specifically to hear disputes like these. But one side has a lawyer and the other can't afford one. And the process is so difficult, so technical that the average person just can't navigate it on their own. And so we are essentially losing what is the First Amendment right to petition our government, right? And suffering these consequences, totally unjust, in my opinion. So Courtroom 5 has a solution for that. We've developed do-it-yourself technology for average people to be able to navigate those complex technical procedures. On their own, we've had thousands of people go soup to nuts through this process and make a decent showing of it, right? There are still times, though, where people actually need a lawyer, need some access to a lawyer. And so what our technology does is to help them be able to work with lawyers in a new way, right? Where they can specify just tiny tasks that they might be able to pay $200 or $300 for at a time, right? And get that legal assistance that they need that they otherwise wouldn't be able to access. And so that's where we are. We're in the process of launching a marketplace so that the users who use our technology can now begin to get legal services, actual access to lawyers.
That's a great summary. And you're right that it is an important, the legal system is supposed to work for us. There shouldn't be so many barriers along the way that prevent us from accessing our basic rights as people to protection under the law and to be able to navigate those systems without going into debt or needing a large sum of money. And so I forget the exact phrasing, but you mentioned that it's not just unjust, but undemocratic.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to describe it. So the resources that you are offering your customers, is it a sort of a bank of PDFs? What is it exactly that if I sign up for Courtroom 5 that I'm getting from your service?
Yeah, great question. So it is actually a process that we've developed. It's embedded in technology that you can use online. The experience is, you'll tell us what court you're in, what type of claim you're dealing with, and then who the parties in your case are. And we simply walk you at every step of the case through making a good decision on what to file at any particular step. And then secondly, making that filing as effective, as persuasive as you can be with a judge in order to get to the next step, right? So the problem you're facing when you're representing yourself is you have got to file potentially hundreds of very technical legal documents to get an outcome based on the actual facts of your case. All right. If you don't do that competently, you'll get tripped up on those procedures and lose without ever getting a chance to present those facts. And so our technology essentially, again, answers those two questions. Well, what do I do now? Right. And secondly, how do I make that persuasive so that I can get to the next step? And so there's artificial intelligence that tracks your case, right? And prompts you anytime something changes in the case, it prompts you with some information that's relevant to where you are. It also points you to training so that you can evaluate your options for responding. For legal reasons, we can't tell you, and we may not know explicitly what you should do. So we don't give legal advice, but we do help you understand some reasonable options and understand what those options mean so you can decide the best way to proceed. Once you've done that, then we move on to helping you make that filing as good as it can be. We help you evaluate the underlying legal elements of your claim. So for instance, if you have a foreclosure case here in North Carolina, there are elements of what has to be proven for a foreclosure that are defined by North Carolina law. We want to make sure you know what those legal elements are, and then you can associate what actually happened in your case, right, to support those. And so every step of the way, we want you to update that process, because out of that comes the argument that you need to make to the court in that specific filing, right? So we walk you through that every step of the way. Once you've decided your argument, well, you can't just go to court and say, here's my argument, judge. You have to show the judge that the law actually supports that argument. And so we help you find in the case law, that's appellate court decisions, in the statutes and the rules of procedure, we help you find legal support for the argument that you've decided to make in that filing. Once you've got that, then we help you organize your facts, your argument, your legal support, everything that's necessary into a PDF document that you can download, but it is in legal formatting that looks like a lawyer prepared it, right? Judges are used to seeing the arguments presented in a certain way. So you can't just write a letter to the judge saying, this is what I want to argue. You have to put it in a format that the judge can understand. And so we help you do that. You download it, you file it. We give you electronic filing instructions where that's available, right? Because we're nationwide, not just in North Carolina. And so we want to make sure that you can get that file. And then that process just repeats over and over and over. So again, you're going to end up filing hundreds of these documents, going through that process potentially hundreds of times so that you can get an outcome based on your facts.
That's cool that you all are nationwide now. I didn't realize that. Is this information that you're sharing with folks, you're helping them compile the necessary information they need, and then sort of walking them through their options? Are these resources out there already, and you were helping sort of coalesce them through your platform, or are these resources folks wouldn't typically have access to unless they went through either you or a law firm or a lawyer of some sort?
And so it's both, right? The law is public. And so those elements that I described, what is a foreclosure in North Carolina, that's public. It may be difficult to find, right? But it is available. Things like the case law, the rules of procedure, the statutes, obviously that's public as well. Maybe difficult to find, definitely difficult to use, right? For the average person, but we have collected that data and made it accessible, available for lay people in a format that's easy to find. We also have training. We've probably got hundreds of videos on various aspects of the law, right? So that we can help you understand how to use that public information. And then our document templates are unique, right? So if you've got to file, let's say you want to move to dismiss a complaint against you. We've created a very simple workflow for you to be able to, again, collect the information organize the information you've collected into something that looks like a PDF. So all of that is custom. That's developed by Courtroom 5. The training, the workflows, and all of that other stuff helps you use the public information to be able to get your way in court.
Did you or do you have a legal background, or did you have to bring folks in to help put together those training videos and such?
We do. I do not have a legal background except for what I've earned the hard way by
Sure.
representing myself in court. I'm a PhD electrical engineer. And so, you know, when I had to represent myself, I managed to muddle through, if you will, right? It was very difficult, but I pick up things very quickly because of those educational advantages. My co-founder, Deborah Sloan, is a PhD librarian. She is also not a lawyer. She's an information scientist. And if you know anything about librarians, they know how to curate the best information and break it down and make it accessible to lay people, right? And so the two of us who had our own experiences representing ourselves in court knew how to develop a pattern, if you will, a process to help average people do that. And then Deborah curated the information and created much of it to help people navigate their own cases. We do have lawyers in the mix. So our business development lead, in fact, is a lawyer, our top sales and marketing person, because we are actually using lawyers as salesmen, if you will. You know, those that are working with us on our platform to provide services. And so, but she's the only lawyer on the team, right? We've got strong tech people and other folks working with us. Our advisory board, though, more than half of them, I believe, are lawyers. Some of the pioneers in legal tech, in fact, are on our advisory board, whether from LegalZoom or Avo. Some folks may recognize, lawyers would recognize as the biggest law firm marketing company probably in the world. And folks like that who've just helped us develop our solution, not just for people in court without a lawyer, but for the legal industry itself.
Yeah, you mentioned something about being able to, you know, librarians being good about curating that information. And I find that is throughout government and citizens engaging with government, that is true across not just legal services, but in general. Often the information that folks need to make choices about how they engage with their community is often really hard to find. Whether it's going through the city to, you know, file a, you know, it could be a complaint about you know, poor water quality in your neighborhood, or you know, I work with the local transportation nonprofit here in Durham, Bike Durham, and we do a lot of traffic calming projects with neighborhoods. They want to get, you know, streets repainted so that cars are more likely to slow down, or put, you know, speed bumps, you know, in the road for those sort of things. But a lot of folks just don't know where to begin when they want to make those kinds of requests. And often you find that, you know, either folks with money or just more affluent communities have those resources, have that knowledge to be able to make those assertions, and the communities that don't get left behind. And so it's nice to have a platform that can level the playing field a bit.
It's true.
In that sense.
Let me just say, I mean, I think some of that, frankly, is intentional. It really angers me when I think about it sometimes, you know, the way many of our governments set up those disparities, right? Every municipality in the country has a public library, every one of them, right? And in order to be a librarian, you got to have a master's degree. Okay, you have to have a demonstrated capability of finding information and making it accessible for average people, right? And so we've got these wonderful libraries with these very smart people in them, with books and all this other information that they all day long hand out to their patrons. Wonderful service for any city or, you know, or county to have, right? But the vast majority of the information, as you've mentioned here, that patrons need is in the city government or county government. Why can't we deploy that tremendous talent that we put in public libraries to helping people access the information in their own government? It's a no-brainer, right? Why isn't that done? But it's obviously, I can go on for a while about this, but these are the sorts of disparities that our government set up against us all day, every day, and it's really unjust.
I was sort of perusing around your website, and you all mentioned some of the types of cases that you all take, and you even alluded to some of them at the beginning of our conversation. Is there a, I mean, I imagine based on the work that you all are doing, that a lot of our marginalized communities in the country are the ones in need of services like this. But sort of drilling down a little bit further, are there any specific types of people or communities that you find are using Courtroom 5 more than others? And how do you all think about, in terms of outreach, how to get in front of those folks so that they know who you are?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we don't routinely collect demographic data, but we do some surveys now and then. And in every instance, we find more Black and brown people. The civil justice system disproportionately affects us, as does the criminal justice system. Right. And so that's what we find. We find people in the 35 to 55 range. There's a significant disproportionately female base as well. But yeah, that's who we're serving. But this is such a broad-based problem. It really affects anyone who's not wealthy. Okay. And so we find all kinds of people using our technology for sure. We don't do anything particular to get in front of them. I mean, I think I find myself, just because I'm a Black woman and happy to, represent, find myself talking to Black and brown media more often, I guess, than some other media might reach out to me. And I'm obviously happy to do that because that, again, our base is disproportionately Black and brown. And so I absolutely want to make sure they know about what we offer here. But beyond that, I mean, we are on Google ads and Facebook ads and that sort of thing. And so we don't necessarily target a particular demographic because it's such a broad-based problem.
And I imagine word of mouth is probably strong for you all as well, given that the service that you offer is can be really important or transformative. Someone who doesn't have the means to pay for a lawyer is definitely the kind of thing where if I used it, I would want to pass that knowledge along to somebody in my community. How has Courtroom 5, I know you talked a little bit about working with some, folks in the law community to help build your platform, but how has Courtroom 5 been received generally by both the government and sort of lawyers outside of your working group?
Sure. So, the law is very broad. There are different segments that respond to what we're doing differently. So, if you are a corporate lawyer, you're familiar with problems of access to justice. You hear all the time how the profession is failing the public, right? And so they, folks in those positions are happy that we exist. They can sort of check that off. Oh, where there's Courtroom 5 to take care of this problem. It's not true. We haven't done it yet, right? But they are receptive and in many instances helpful to what we're trying to do. There are consumer-facing lawyers, though, who sometimes feel that we are taking money away from them, right? And so they are a little bit more cautious and on guard. Hostile in some respects. You'll see lawyers commenting on our Facebook ads in a very negative way sometimes, right? And that's fine. That's understood. What we are working to help them understand, though, is our customers can't afford them, right? We are not serving the same people for sure, right? We can and we hope to help them help our customers, but we're not taking money away from them for sure. And then there's a third sector in the government itself. So every state has a bar that is responsible not just for disciplining the lawyers, right, in that jurisdiction, but for making sure that the public is protected, right, from unscrupulous actors. There are people out here pretending to be a lawyer, and taking people's money and that sort of thing. And so they have a somewhat ambivalent but watchful eye over our activities, just to make sure, and I absolutely respect this function, that we're not harming people. right? And so we try to be proactive and just make sure we've got an open door for those sorts of conversations as well.
You mentioned earlier that you all are not do not give legal advice. You're just sort of setting people up to make the best choice for themselves. Is that a sort of choice that you've made as like part of your business model, or is there a legal reason why you all cannot give that kind of advice?
Oh, both actually. And so, as I said, we don't often know, as non-lawyers in particular, what somebody should be doing in their cases. We just don't know. And so we wouldn't want to give legal advice as a machine. You understand, we don't directly interact with our customers.
Right.
They are working with our technology. And so no machine can give legal advice, right? Again, it can provide information readily, but we wouldn't want to be telling people you should do that, you should do this, because we just don't know. No machine can know, right? But so that's one reason. But secondly, yes, it absolutely is against the law, right, for non-lawyers to provide legal advice. Every state has a prohibition against the unauthorized practice of law, and giving legal advice is practicing law. So we don't do that.
Yeah. I imagine that that was put in place, but to your point, states are allowed to kind of make their own decisions. And so, who knows how each state would want to handle that sort of thing.
That's an interesting point and very timely, actually. So there are a couple of states that are really relaxing those sorts of rules, and a number of states are looking at it because there's such a problem with accessing justice, with people being able to handle, to get the services they need. So in Utah, they have what's called a regulatory sandbox, where companies like ours can go and flagrantly violate the rules that are in place in other states, but under the watchful eye of regulators, so that they can see, how our business practices might harm consumers. And if they're not harming consumers, the idea is you're fine to practice, right? You just have to report on your activities. We haven't joined the sandbox. It's in our roadmap, but I know a number of other companies similar, or at least in the same do-it-yourself technology space, who've had very good experiences with that model. Arizona has done some similar things, right? And there's some other states experimenting. North Carolina, we hope, will take some guidance there as well. On the other side, there are states like California, which are actively working to ban by law those sorts of experiments, right? There are lawyers nationwide, but in particular in California, that are afraid of these models for the reasons I described earlier, and really stymieing any kind of innovation. And so, the pendulum hopefully will swing more towards innovation and regulators being able to work with companies like mine. But we're still in that space of trying to find out which way we're going to go as a country.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the gifts and curses, I think, of the way our country is set up, is the all of the variation and experimentation that can happen throughout the 50 states can make creating models that are universal difficult for businesses, but even for potentially your customers as well, where each state has different laws for basically everything. And so traversing that information state to state, if you're visiting a friend or family member in New York City and something happens and you're both maybe dealing with your own state's laws and New York state's laws, it can be tricky. So yeah, the fact that you all are already thinking about that and sort of have some things in place to cover the 50 states is, I'm sure, a benefit to your customers. To wrap up, you've shared so much in the little time that we've chatted, and I really appreciate it. I'd love to just hear your thoughts in general on where you think technology can be the most transformative going forward for folks in terms of being more engaged with their governments, both local, state, and national government, and also just their communities in general? Where can technology be a place that really improves our lives as people? Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I'm a techie. I'm an engineer by training. And so I've seen for decades the power of technology to improve our access and to improve people's lives, right? And so I have seen, even within the legal profession, within government, many, many ways that the application of technology can improve things. Here in North Carolina, for instance, the courts are just beginning to open access to court records, right? There's a statewide initiative to bring courts online, those court records online, which is fantastic. It's going to take a good number of years to make that happen, but that will improve access to justice in the state of North Carolina, and just folks being able to access the courts a little more easily, right? We saw during the pandemic that while the physical courthouses had to close, they had a constitutional obligation to remain open in some way. And so we saw much more access to electronic filings in the court made available to people without lawyers. So lawyers had been able to do that for a while, but now regular people around the country are more able to do that as well. So there are loads of opportunities for technology to make a difference. But frankly, we have to have the people who would adopt that technology, right? Bring it into our institutions, be willing to do that. Because what we find is that technology scales in a way that people cannot, right? And so you've seen it at grocery store self-service checkout, right? Just logically, why would someone working in a grocery store want self-service checkout, right? Okay, but it is very scalable, and we've got to get that mindset out of our government, okay? Because people don't scale in the way that technology can, and we're limiting access by limiting technology. So it's not a question of technology. The tech is ready, right? It's a question of our own mentality and our orientation towards our citizens to make what we have in government more accessible to everybody.
That's a wonderful answer and a great place to end our conversation.